because I would say that Paul is also an improvement from Vince, right? From a morale standpoint, from a humanistic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? I mean, I would say so.
I think he's definitely an improvement, but he also says stuff that really makes me wonder what kind of sort of cultural intelligence he has. Like he'll say things like, I don't see color, and like we know that back in the 1990s maybe you get away with that, but in 2025 it's a really sort of insensitive thing to say. But even in describing Vince, he'll say things like, well, no human is perfect, and like again, that's another thing that someone could get away with in describing someone who has flaws that you don't really put a spotlight on today. So like to me, I think from the wrestling perspective, I think he does a really good job. I also agree with you when it comes to the booking. I'm not the biggest Paul Levesque Booker fan there is. The part that I am disappointed in him is as the spokesperson for the company, because he says a lot of things that I really, really disagree with morally, and it makes me think that he either doesn't care or he doesn't get it. And I have to think with where he is in the company, he has to get it. So I have to go with the idea that he just doesn't care.
Doesn't care what he says. You mean what he's like? How he could? Because I think he cares about what his job is. But
you're saying his job is fine. He doesn't care about the things that you just mentioned, like Brock Lesnar coming back. Like to him, like he's trying to make this a pro wrestling angle when the actual question is, how does this tie into the legal trouble? Because Triple H is bullshitting his way through the Brock Lesnar stuff because he is taking his fan base for dummies, which
that's where I'm at. That's where I feel more that he doesn't respect his audience.
So, for instance, what did he say? Well, John Cena's the one calling the shots. When the reality of the situation is they're holding Brock Lesnar out for legality reasons. Like, that's the reason. And maybe he doesn't want to say that, which is okay. But don't make this about a wrestling storyline unless you feel like your fans are nothing but marks. And if you do feel like that, I guess you can treat them that way. But at some point, that mentality is going to bite you in the ass.
I mean, but it hasn't, though. I get frustrated. Like to me, the first time I saw an inkling of that, well, I've seen it many times, but the one where it was very overt was with the whole R-Truth thing.
Yeah.
Where like he straight out said, "Oh, it's part of the show." And I'm like, even like the like the hardcore marks, right? The ones that I still believe it's real to them. Even they knew the news of what was happening with R-Truth, and to him, for him to say, "Oh, I was part of the show," it's like, no, it wasn't. This is and so that kind of left me with a bad taste in my mouth. But yeah, he's been doing that for a while. He should. I mean, and what's frustrating is that there's certain lies that they'll say that even if you're honest, it's gonna be okay. Even with the Brock Lesnar thing, like, just be honest. Just say, you know what, we have legals checked into it, and we feel that it's okay to bring him back. Are you gonna get heat for it? Yes, you are. You're always gonna get heat for it, but at least you're being honest. You know
what his excuse used to be? The reason we're not doing X, Y, and Z is because if fans Google this person, being China, they would find out that she had this past that we are not happy with, right?
They were talking about Matt Riddle.
Anybody, right? China had the porn stuff, and this was Triple H's excuse for her not being in the Hall of Fame. They have since put her in the Hall of Fame. You Google Brock Lesnar, you probably don't have to go that far into your search to figure out why he was out. Like, so that doesn't play with me. And maybe he can't use that excuse anymore, and maybe that's why he doesn't. But it wasn't that long ago when you treated your audience as kind of smart. Like, oh, if they actually Google China, it's not going to be WWE Hall of Famer. It's going to be she was in she was in adult movies with Sean Waltman. But yet Sean Waltman was in the Hall of Fame. So it like that stuff didn't really make that much sense. And I just, I just feel like as a fan, like, and let's equate this to what you just equated it with real sports. The Dodgers owner, very new owner, very savvy, very rich dude, gonna be successful. If he was just going out here and saying stuff off the cuff, I don't think you would lose your Dodger fandom, because it goes way beyond just a stupid owner. But you would probably feel some kind of way. There's a reason why these guys, they kind of stay out of the spotlight. Let's say your GM, Andrew Friedman. If Andrew Friedman started making cultural things, comments about the different races of the players, you would be like, where the F is this coming from? Like, so it's just so weird that Triple H doesn't have these answers to these very simple questions that have to do with what his job is, which is talent, which is people, which is the culture of the company. And he's just like, it's a business, and you fans are too stupid really to understand, so we don't have to be honest. Like, that is the part where I just don't get. And maybe this study that has, or the stereotype that wrestling fans are on a slightly different level of education, or whatever they used to say. I mean, maybe some of that is right, because some of the stuff that I do read and I do see from a fandom perspective, I'm like, come on, like, do I have to spell it out in red pen for you to understand what this is? But what is the defense mechanism? I don't want to know. I just like to see the TV. I don't need to know what goes on in the background. I just can't wait to see what happens next on the show. And that's my stance. And maybe that's all it is to some folks. But like you, I find it a little harder to sit in that kind of gray area, I guess.
But I think honoring our authentic selves, right? Because one thing I don't do about myself, I don't make excuses. Like, again, if I'm supporting a show that has Brock Lesnar on it, and I'm watching it, like, I have to come to terms with that, with my own internal whatever I used to. I'm not gonna sit there and make excuses. Oh, well, it's just one time. Oh, well, I'm pirating Peacock. Oh, I'm not gonna do that because that's lying to myself. I'm gonna sit there and say, you know what, I'm not being truthful to my ethics right now. But does the value that I get from wrestling supersede that? And you know what? I'm sad to say that at times it does. It does. And that's something I got to live with. So, I'll give you a quick example, because, again, using the Dodgers, I don't know how far the news reached Northern California, but the Dodgers were in hot water for a while because they were not responding to all the ice raids.
Yes. You're right. You're right about that.
So I had gotten together with my friends, and I did say, I was like, you know what? If they don't say anything within the next week, I'm not gonna go to any of the games this year. I'm just not gonna do it. That was my own self-negotiating, which again, it was pretty kind of self-serving, but it was all I could do, right?
Yeah.
Because I was still gonna watch them on TV, but
right.
But I mean, again, it is what it is. But they did speak up, and they did donate to certain, nonprofits for immigration. But it took them a long time. But I was ready to make a move. I was like, I'm not gonna go to the game. I'm not gonna go to any live games this year, because it's, first of all, it's expensive as hell, and I'm not gonna put that kind of money into their pocket, So I haven't had to make decisions, even in sports, when it comes to that. But we'll see. With wrestling, is so hard because it's so ingrained in me. I just can't shut it off, and I don't see myself doing it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, giving up wrestling would be like giving up baseball or giving up the NBA. Like, that would be a hard thing for me to do, because it's just in my natural progression. Like, the first thing I do when I wake up is, if it's a Monday, I refresh my podcast feed so that I can see if, Brian and Dave recorded, from the night before. But that's just become so habitual and so much part of my own human process, my daily life process, that it would be really hard to step away. And I'm with you on the, kind of like drawing a line. I remember when Khashoggi was killed in Saudi Arabia, and there was this thought like maybe WWE should postpone their show, and Vince was like, nope, fuck it, we're going. Right. I was like, okay, that's him putting his foot down. And so I didn't watch I think it was like the first 2 or 3 Saudi Arabia shows. I just didn't watch them. But then when I start doing Wrestling Observer Radio with Dave, like I can't not watch those because that is part of what we cover. And then so now I'm a hypocrite for that, but it's because I've taken this position in doing the show. In order to do the show to the best of my ability, I have to know what's going. So it was like this weird thing as well.
And you have to be okay with being both. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, and I think that makes people authentic, and people are when people like authentic people, even though they can't really explain why. You know, it's because we don't lie to ourselves, make excuses. But it's been hard. It has been hard. You know, and again, that's just the representation of the entire world that we're living in right now, which makes, for example, to stay on topic here and not go too far into the weeds. What about if Triple H is being influenced like with the people he works with? Because I will say this, and I don't know if
he is.
I don't know if you remember this.
100% he is.
I feel like WWE has regressed over the last 6 months to a year, because when there was that little window where Paul took over before the TKO merger, where we were seeing all these like progressive changes to the point that we didn't even have disqualifications anymore. Remember that? He just wouldn't. And then once you start getting the TKO influence, I feel like the past year they've kind of regressed back to just being like this corporate, heartless machine again. You know, It wasn't always like this when Paul took over, and so I do feel that he's being influenced. It's kind of hard when you're with the good old boys club, right? And you have Dana White right there flaunting all his money and his power, and you're Triple H, and you're like, well, I could be that too. Why, you know? And so it's hard to like not to go against that when you're always surrounded by that, and Triple H is always surrounded by these like, you know, tough, mean, good old boys, you know, from back in the day. And so I would imagine that it's hard for him. I'm not making excuses for him, but that's got to play into it.
I think you're right. I think it would influence anybody if you want to be successful and you're part of a corporation, and the people atop the corporation say, "Well, this is how we do it." If you don't do it that way, you're not going to be there for very long. So you kind of have to embody what that company is. And you know, you talk about Dana. My biggest worry as a wrestling fan was that WWE would become more like UFC.
And they have been.
They're not there yet, but they are getting closer for sure. Seeing Triple H, you know, go stand next to Donald Trump, and you're like, wait, this is the presidential fitness thing, and one guy's got a bad heart and is jacked up on steroids, and the other guy just eats McDonald's quarter pounders all day long. Like, what are we doing here? RFK is not into vaccines, and he's into all these like wacky, like what is going on here? This is like bizarro world,
right?
And so yeah, like that is a little disheartening. Not that I thought that, you know, the Greenwich snob was this super liberal standing for everybody, but there Lance Storm made a good argument saying the reason why the Brock Lesnar thing frustrated him more so than the reasons maybe it frustrated us is he was at WWE, is that, and due in part to Triple H, there were so many gains from the women's wrestling perspective where the women wrestling on many cases, I'm way more interested to watch the women's matches than the men's matches because there's less of them and they seem a little bit more meaningful in the big picture.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with you.
But when you bring Brock back, it is a little bit of a step backwards in this progression of what you're telling the wrestling industry, how you care about women. So I thought that was a pretty interesting point, but that also comes from him working there and seeing Vince set up segments where he just gets to make out with women who are like 40 years younger than him, and, you know, setting up spots where he gets to, like, you know, be very disrespectful to women as if they're not human, like those kind of things, which was predominantly a Vince thing. It's a wrestling thing, but Vince has so much control of the business. And then you get to see real progression. And Lance was like, okay, this is like actually a step backwards from where we were.